How are you doing? Are you inspired? Is anyone tired? It's been a lot. It's been a lot. My talk is quite complex because it's a complex topic, and I don't like to oversimplify things. I am not a TED speaker. To help us get through this, I'd love us to just do a little bit of a physical exercise. It might help just bring some energy to us and some clarity to our mind, some openness to some of the things that I'm going to share, the lots that I'm going to share. Sandra, where's Sandra? Can you come up to the stage? A round of applause for Sandra. She's going to model something. She's helping me not embarrass myself too much. Thank you. I was inspired by a woman called MC Schafel, who did this exercise at UX Brighton, so I kind of borrowed it because I thought it would be relevant today and it would help us get through this. So if you could all stand up, please. And Sandra's going to model something for us. Thank you again. So I'd like you all to kind of stand on your tiptoes, then put your heels down. Stand on your hip toes. Put your heels down. Stand on your hip toes, put your heels down. Now do it faster and harder, harder. Feel free to shake your hands. Slam it down, up, down. So the idea is this helps to kind of get some oxygen in you and helps you to get some energy going, and it's similar effects to coffee, apparently. So I think I'm labeling this kinetic coffee. I kind of want to just keep you doing that for ages. Cool. Now, thank you, Sandra, but please stay standing. So I believe we're going through an identity crisis. And when I say we, I'm talking about the design industry, particularly digital design industry and UX and all of the many flavors of that. And I'm talking about the many me's. I've been going through an identity crisis for about 6 or 7 years. Still going, strong. Getting better, getting more comfortable with it. And I think some of you might be as well. But I'd love to find out if you are. Sorry about this. So if you are currently going through an identity crisis, can I get some more lights as well, please? More lights, more illumination I want to see. If you are going through an identity crisis right now, please sit down. This talk is for you. If you have been through an identity crisis or several, please sit down. You might relate to some of this talk. If you believe you will go through an identity crisis, please sit down. And to those of you still standing, I envy you. And maybe you can help us, but maybe what I share can help you help others too. You can now sit down too. Thank you. Get the click working. So I really appreciated this earlier around how our identities are fluid. It's what makes us human. That was quite validating, actually. I really appreciated that. It helped me a little bit more. Maybe clickers. Good old clickers. Maybe it's less of an identity. Oh, hello, check. Maybe it's less of an identity crisis and more of an identity chrysalis as we move forwards, as we change, as we adapt. What comes on the other side of that? How do we become these beautiful butterflies? How do we move through these transitional states? When I think about identity, sometimes I think about brand identity. And when I think about brand identity, I think about brand guru Martin Neumeyer, a very talented guy who likes to simplify brand and identity for organizations. He has 3 simple questions he proposes to people. Who are you? What do you do? And why does it matter? Well, he's not really talking about people, he's talking about organizations. But I think it can apply to you individually. Who are you? What do you do? Why does it matter? Now, I believe every designer is different, like every human is different. We all have unique potential. We might just not realize it yet. And sometimes, designers in particular, we can be quite delicate, like snowflakes. It's a very vulnerable vocation, design. We put so much heart and soul into it. We entwine our identity with our work so often, and that's why so many designers go through these identity crises. The thing is, we often put people in boxes, giving them the labels that try to say, you are like that person over there, a UX, a product designer, content designer, as if we're all going to be the same. People try to put me in a box. What's your niche, Jason? And I say, I am my own niche. I need a Jason-shaped hole for my Jason shape. We also tend to put people on the same sorts of career ladders. Love the clicker. So for me, myself, I've gone up the career ladder from a graduate to a junior to middleweight, leader, senior, and then I've kind of stepped to the side. And I wonder whether the concept of a trellis or a kind of climbing net might be more appropriate. We can move sideways, up, down, and around. Stop thinking we have to keep on getting greater status, greater accountability, greater money. How can we adapt to what we need? We also put people on the same paths, as if we came from the same place. But we've come from different places. We're all on our own journeys, and we'll go forwards in our own ways. These concepts are really useful in some ways. They're a natural human approach to conditioning and structuring, making sense of the complexity. They're useful and seductive, but they can limit us. How well do they serve our potential? As I said, I believe every designer is different. So how can you shape the futures you want? By shaping yourself more intentionally. How can you shape your own unique future path? I want to help navigate some of this complexity through a series of metaphors, some personal, vulnerable stories, and some tools that I've been creating over the years. These models are, imperfect. They're useful, but they're not fully sufficient. Just treat them lightly. If they help, they help. If they don't, try different ones. I was inspired by a conference that was talking about tectonic shifts, and I thought about ourselves as personal planets with multiple layers. And I came up with this idea of multiple layers of ourselves, including the environment around us that we help shape and shapes us, the technical fields of practices and skills we learn for our profession, the foundational skills that we maybe learn at school and we use to help transfer to different professions in the future, and the relational skills and experiences we have, the multiple personas we wear to adapt to the people and contexts around us. And ultimately, our true identity, our true self, based on our values, our meaning, purpose, that dreaded authentic self. And I'm just going to try and illustrate some ways in which you can navigate this complexity through some tools that I've been developing. I call it like a self-strategy toolkit, codename Shaping Design. And the idea is that they're engaging visual frameworks. They're tackling hard, tough issues with something that's a little bit easier and more approachable than a spreadsheet or a personality test. They're designed to decode designer differences for individuals and for teams. And they're using perfect taxonomies because we could never agree on one as an industry. So in your packs, you should have a little brown envelope with a pen and a fold-out thing. You're going to need to use this. We're going to be going through some of this as we go through the talk. And you'll see you've got some of these different layers. And what I'm going to ask you to do is I go through these layers and tell some of my stories and show some of the tools. I would ask you to try and fill out, starting with the comfort levels. How comfortable are you with these different layers of self? How aware are you? How connected are you to them? You may indicate how important they are to you in your future, and how much you currently invest in, and how much you think you should be investing for the future. So a little notation system, you can mark like the current state with a dot or circle, and maybe like a chevron or an arrowhead to show like future state, where you want to move to. And just this is a kind of like a reflection tool. Don't worry about it being perfect. You can always redo it in the future. So just a little illustration from earlier, just filling it out. So as we go through, you might mark a little dot, think about what we've been talking about, and then working out where you might want to move to. So let's start with the environment. How does the environment shape you? How has it shaped you? And how do you want to shape the environment? When I think about the environment in these ways, I'm thinking about society as a whole, the communities we're part of, the organizations that run conferences and events like this, or your employer, or your academic institution, and the various people in your life that maybe inspire you, or oppress you, or support you. This is a wall in my bathroom at home. It's got some of the pictures from my parents in childhood. These are my parents. I couldn't find the original ones. My dad's a bit of a cool cat. And he's still operating that way. Maybe when he was 30, actually. He's actually Turkish Cypriot, and I had no relation to his Turkish culture. I know no German. I know German. I don't know Turkish. I take the name Mesut. I have the skin tone that allows me to tan in the sunlight. I sometimes have a bit of a Mediterranean temperament. And I may have inherited certain genetic disorders or gifts, however you see them. Now, a few months ago, my dad said, Mesut means happy? And I was like, no shit. And I was like, well, what does Jason mean in Greek? And it means healer. And I was like, does that make me the happy healer? The healer of happy? I was like, it's coming together. But it's also the most ironic thing I've ever heard, because I suffer from various anxiety and depression over the years. I'm a designer, after all. So this is me with my brothers. My youngest brother, 7 years younger, and my oldest brother, 4 years younger. He didn't like me coming along. The youngest brother took a lot of attention away. I was the classic middle child, left alone to my own devices, recessive. The Mesut men, when they get together, they're pretty argumentative, pretty provocative, and so am I outside of the family, or have been. They're also neurodivergent. Both my brothers are dyslexic, possibly my dad, and I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD. And this is the first talk I've ever done on ADHD meds. I think it's going okay. And I grew up in a place called Norwich, which is on the east side of England, and there's this amazing cathedral. And I was very academically strong, and I was selected and tutored to go and get a scholarship to a private school. These people were generally whiter than me, of a different social class, and I struggled to fit in. I often rebelled. I experienced mild racist abuse about the skin tone, and because I was academically strong, kids didn't really like it, I rebelled by going to this place in Norwich called Chapelfield Gardens. It was a place in the middle of the city, and I would go there on Saturday afternoons. I had Saturday morning school, that sucks. And I would take my school uniform off, pack it in a bag, and pretend to be one of all the people there. In this place was a whole mix of different cultures of youth, ranging from early teenagers to 20, 30 years olds. Chaos punks, skateboarders, ravers, all bonded by just getting together and finding their place, mixed with a little bit of recreational drugs and lots of underage drinking. I found love and unity on the dance floor at various raves. I developed a love of DJing and making people move, and being inspired by what became atmospheric drum and bass with LTJ Bookham and recently passed MC Conrad, and collected a lot of records, and they helped to define me and developed a relationship with some of my closest friends. When I went to university, everyone wanted me to do an academic degree, an engineering one, or be a doctor, or be all those sorts of things. That was the path for my school. And it's what my parents, who had to pay something for the school, not as much as other people, they wanted me to succeed and make money. I wanted to do design, like all my other friends. And so I kind of took on a course that was somewhere in between. And I took on this course of industrial design, learning loads of different things, from engineering sides of things to programming, model making, form making, ergonomics, all sorts of stuff, some aspects of user-centered design and strategy. While model making one night, into the early hours, spending ages crafting and finding this, I found design. It came to me through doing. And the course was really good at just learning to learn. And that was an incredibly useful foundational capacity for me in the future. I got an in-house placement at Yellow Pages, the digital Yellow Pages, yell.com, passing up an opportunity to work at a vacuum cleaner company in Malmesbury called Dyson. And I took a path into digital. The early days when we were making stuff up, Flash sites, trying to make a website a day in HTML, testing on ridiculous amounts of browsers. And I was amongst lots of people and peers that would inspire me and learn more about interaction design. For some strange reason, I swam against the tide and ended up in a management consultancy because I kind of got into a lot of debt with my records and my turntables. And I learned how to sell, how to make really strong arguments, how to facilitate in a hard way, and how to compete against other consultants. I also racked up a pretty good expenses bill and gained some weight in the process. I then went to a user experience consultancy where it was very academic, but I learned to rewire my brain and then to forever try to get user research into my practice. And then through a series of creative agencies where I really felt more aligned with the people there, incredible talent, understanding and navigating this world of digital, building teams, becoming a leader, figuring it out as I went along, as well as finding some loneliness in that process. And also getting to a point when I was moved away from the work, and my team would challenge me. You don't know what it's like to do this anymore, Jason. And that hurt. I eventually went to a product strategy consultancy, coming back to my industrial design roots, and learned a lot about foresight and strategy and more structured futures thinking and guidance for organizations. But it was hard to not actually execute and do. And I kind of had really struggled with the different philosophies and ways of working in this sort of physical industrial design way of working. Super interesting projects, kind of done in a different way to what I was used to. Eventually, we agreed that I would leave, and I set up an organization, my own business, to continue with some of the work I was doing with one of the clients. And for the past 9 years, I've been selling, doing the work, working with other people, having some good times with the money, and more recently, as I've been developing my coaching career, seeing that money, that investment going down. But it's seasonal. I know it will come back at some point, and I'm not chasing that path of the Lamborghini or the fast cars and the big house anymore. But along the way, I lost my team. I didn't have a team anymore that I was with all the time. I kind of experienced what a lot of leaders have around professional loneliness, challenged in not really being able to kind of test like what you're thinking and work in partnership with others. So all of these different experiences kind of helped me to develop different technical and leadership skills over the years. A really useful foundation. Now, it's always interesting. I try and do a talk. I try and find some connection with where I'm speaking. And I've been inspired by Sweden. I didn't realize that actually number one when I was born was an ABBA song. Not my favorite ABBA song. I'm not a big ABBA fan. I kind of wish I was born maybe a few days later and it would have been Wuthering Heights, maybe. No disrespect to ABBA. It's got its place. Take a chance on me. And I've been hearing it quite a lot in the hotel. I'm more inspired by the electronic musicians from Sweden. This is Sebastian Mulat, a kind of massive inspiration for me recently. I did a course with him, and he talks amazingly about creativity and improvisation at a really deep level. We didn't learn much about how to do the synth work. It was all about the being. Super fascinating. And this is Seba, another Sebastian, who I got to meet on my birthday in 2020 before the pandemic, who was a legendary, one of the most prolific drum and bass producers ever, and one of the producers of some of my favorite ever tunes. I met him at a night that was run by the late MC Conrad, who died a few weeks ago. And MC Conrad's death really kind of stirred me as much as like other friends and family, because he touched so many people in so many different ways. And I kind of guessed that he was going through his own inner turmoil. I don't know what was going on. But during the time I met him, he was trying to kind of reignite his career. I'm also inspired by teenage engineering. I love their products. Like, God, they're not usable. But like, they're so quirky, so beautiful, really well thought out from an industrial design perspective. And I have several of these things, and I don't play with them enough. And they have a really interesting following. And I love the way that they're different from other products. And inspired by Volvo and the automotive industry that's developed in Sweden. And also, I'm an avid user of Spotify. I'm not inspired by all of Spotify's practices. And IKEA got me through a lot of furniture challenges. Even now, I have a lot of IKEA. So thank you. I'm also inspired by friends of mine and people that I know who have come to Sweden. Lauren Curry, who's managed to set up front an initiative to kind of inspire people to be more bold in their leadership. Anna Dahlstrom, who's kind of wrote a book on storytelling and design. And the McLeods, Alex and Joe, who are a partnership that was really interesting. They kind of swapped ownership of the parental roles so that Alex could come back to work and reignite her career, while Joe pursued engineering and the ends work. And I find their stories super fascinating. It was lovely to catch up with them the other night. But people inspire you, and they also trigger you in different ways. I've lost some interesting people from the industry recently. I mentioned MC Conrad a few weeks ago. But I also lost a friend and a peer in Ofer Deshi. We were in competition for a while, and I helped him get a job, and we were working together. He was my client. And then I was going to be meeting him the following week for a catch-up about future work, and I was so excited. I was going to bring my group of humans colleagues to kind of work on an interesting project for Tesco. And I got a message from someone just saying, he's just died in the water. The pandemic took a bit of an edge off that. I mean, people used to talk about him in such brilliant ways. He had such a great legacy of development for people. And I kind of wondered whether they told him that. Bercy, who you see in this picture, she was one of the first people I mentored. Again, she was found dead in a lake. And that really destroyed me. I haven't spoken to her in years, but we had so many common friends. And Wayne Coughlin, he was a fellow IXDA leader who was helping to kind of promote Africa Interaction Design Association groups around the world. And he died last year. And that hurt hard because he was also a bigger guy. I think he died of a heart attack. And that really upset me because he did so much for the community. These people just make you kind of question maybe what your legacy is. Different deaths, family or friends, they'll make you think about your future in different ways. It's one of the reasons people have midlife crises, because more people around them die. And it affects you. It affects what your priorities might be, how you might live the rest of your life. This is me with some fellow local leaders last week in Berlin as we were trying to navigate some of the trauma we're experiencing with IXDA right now. As it potentially dies, as we potentially think about what goes further forwards. IXDA was my tribe. It allowed me to meet people like Chris, like Cheryl, and so many of my heroes and friends. And to think that it won't exist anymore, possibly, really scares me. And it scares me for the industry, because we need things to get people together in person like this. So all these different things have kind of helped to inform me. These environments help to shape me. And all of this stuff kind of feeds this, what I call a psychobiome. All of these experiences, these things around you can help to inform your feelings, your thinking, your intuition, your insights, and your ideas that cannot help be integrated into your design work in some ways. And I like to give back. I like to take this input and to put things out into the world. I think that's my role. I think that's part of my identity, to share, to help others. And to think around the kind of locus of attention, like thinking about how you serve yourself and the people in your team and your stakeholders and wider society as it opens out. So as you could hopefully can pick up on your sheets, I wonder how comfortable are you with how the environment is shaping you and your contribution to it? The easiest layer to talk about with people is this technical layer, the fields of practice or the technical skills that we need in our jobs, the various methods we have. You know, what capabilities do you bring to your profession? We're probably all familiar with this model of T-shaped designer, or broken cone people, or Dan Saffer's diagram of different user experience disciplines, or Liz Bacon's kind of fields of user experience diagram that's been influential many years ago. A friend of mine took an adaptive path model and brought it to LBI where I was working, and it kind of structured the user experience into these 4 quadrants. And we used to kind of draw shapes on them to indicate like what our levels of confidence or competence were in different areas and where we might want to grow. And everyone was different and they could reflect on it. So I invite you to look on the back of the sheet and do one for yourself. I've just adjusted the categories slightly. And the idea is to do this really quickly. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes. Just maybe mark some points on this chart, this weird shaped chart, around how confident you are in each of these different areas. Don't question the taxonomies too much. And just mark your shape. And if you've done your shape, maybe write something on it. Why? Why have you marked it in that way? Why do you want to grow in a particular area? Maybe the arrows are going inwards. Maybe there are areas you want to just let go of. You want to let that muscle atrophy. The interesting thing about this, when you do it with a team or you share with your manager, lots of people have different shapes. And I think that's part of the problem. Even just this kind of very tangible layer, you can all be very different. I got the opportunity to work with Brenda Laurel on a more refined framework of this, expanding the categories and using more of a radar shape. And we got to do something at IXDA to share it in Seattle to kind of get an understanding. As you can see some of the pictures here, there's all sorts of shapes and differences across them. And this is the general framework. But we won't do that today. It takes a little bit longer because of that. The way you segment things in this way kind of affects your relationship to the scoring. When I used to interview people, when I was doing a lot of interviews, interviewing hundreds of designers, I would often kind of review their portfolio and get them to do one of those shapes. And then I would also ask them this awkward trick question, are you more UX or UI? The purpose being I wanted to see the other side of what they might not have shown in their portfolio. And I realized you could kind of take lots of different false dichotomies and put them on like a spectrum, like a polarities, and then mark like an individual spot for where your center of gravity was between these two poles, and then brackets indicating like what your range might be, how far into one or the other you might go, and maybe where you wanted to shift your center of gravity, expand or contract the range. So looking back at the reflection sheet, how comfortable are you with your technical capabilities? As we go deeper, we go into this area of what I call foundational skills. Sometimes they're things that you learn at school. Sometimes they're things you pick up again later in life when you're transitioning. You know, anything from how you understand the world, how you think, and how you communicate. Anything from sketching, a lost art. My friend Eva Lottis teaches a lot of great sketching to designers who've forgotten that. Even just reading well or listening. Listening as a coach is like a core skill. So it's amazing to listen and learn to listen better. So what foundational competencies support the technical for you and are transferable to other preferences? And how comfortable are you with those foundational levels. Here's an example map of what I have. And some of them are repeating, because listening is both an understanding thing and a communication thing. It's taking in, but also portraying out that you're engaging. And aspects like abstracting and scoping can be really useful in terms of strategy, and also other transferable disciplines like product management and those sorts of things. Sometimes I have these kind of qualities things where you have some particular words and you circle the top ones and maybe give a weighting to each of these things, like how you think and operate and how you might communicate. So how comfortable are you with your foundational skills? Then we have the relational. This is where your personas, your multiple personas exist, how you adapt to the people around you, those that you're with. You often find that you are yourself in relation to others. So how do you behave in those situations? How do you collaborate and do team working together? And how do you lead others? Who are you in those different contexts and in relation to the others within them? So I have these many personas, professional ones, and lots of personal personas that I have to kind of navigate. And sometimes this is part of my identity crisis. I don't know who I need to be in that particular moment. Sometimes it's hard as I code switch. Maybe part of my upbringing. It's an advantage in some ways, but in others, it's really, really tough. So I'd invite you to just go to this Mentimeter survey, menti.com 437, and please shout out if it's not working. Hopefully you can scan the QR code. And I want you to kind of maybe list out a few qualities that you think are important for a modern-day designer. Oh, damn. It stops the music when I go and check. So these are some of the things coming back from 164, 183, all these different words. It's super interesting just to see this. And I do kind of analyze the data afterwards. But what's curious when I do this, typically, and I've done this several times in various talks over the years, and I get some of the similar answers, things like empathy and those sorts of things. Interestingly, back in 2005, I asked a similar question. Well, it was a broader question, actually, to my peers and colleagues and clients, like what makes a good experience architect, is what we used to call them at LBI. And I got a whole bunch of different key attributes and skills that we prioritized and weighted. And what was super interesting is they cut across the foundational skills, qualities, interpersonal skills, and team skills, a little bit of knowledge. But it wasn't about the practices, the methods, the techniques and stuff. This is what made a good user experience person according to these people. And we kind of created a chart where we got people to analyze their peers. And even a kind of famous usability guru at the time. We didn't actually work with him, but we just guessed. We were being nasty. And created a kind of like a visual metaphor of all, ways to represent these different skills, from being a good listener to be able to communicate well orally, having a balanced brain between creativity and rationality, a heart of gold, standing up for your ideas with a strong backbone, safe hands, strong arms and legs for kind of delivery, and the ability to kind of have an anal attention to detail that also have bigger picture vision. We created this poster that in 2005 I took to various conferences, and we used to use it at recruitment things to just say, what kind of designer are you? We might take the technical skills map that we had and then kind of do one like this and try to understand, like, what did you bring to the table and how you might be different to someone else. And it was meant to be a bit tongue-in-cheek. There was, of course, no perfect experience architect. It was about how we bring these people together based on the needs of the client or the problem at hand. And I think we still struggle to decode what kind of designer or designers or team we need for a particular problem. My old boss used to say, availability is not a skill. But in most professional consulting environments, it totally is. You just pick it up, you can run with it. So I still use this to this day, and I could challenge the categories, but I think it holds up, even 19 years later. And this is an example of the typical things that come back when we do the word cloud. And when I did the actual analysis on it, even though empathy seems like it comes up a lot, what really struck me was how important creativity was, which I thought was valuable, how the collaboration was, really, really valuable. But for me, I was so pleased to see this. I'm biased. I think curiosity is more important than empathy. I feel like I'm going to get shot. But I do think it is. And I talk about that from the experience of being a middle child empath. I don't think it helps a lot of the time. Stands in the way. And I think most of the time we don't have empathy for the people around us. It's mostly sympathy. When I was kind of going for a design leadership role that I thought was perfect, I didn't get it, and I got really upset. I got massively ghosted when ghosting wasn't quite as cool. I created a kind of chart with Martina Hodges-Shell to kind of break down different functional aspects of leadership, the roles of leadership, not just for leaders, but for people who support others. Things like vision and strategy, community, advocacy, collaboration, quality, and get people to kind of indicate how much time they spent in these different areas. And then kind of ask them how confident they are in those different areas. And then the money shot, how much do they enjoy it? And when you do this to leaders, they go, because there's often a delta between what people spend their time on, what they enjoy, and what they're good at. And yet, if you do it across multiple leaders or multiple people in the team, you might see that someone loves doing the thing that you hate, and they're not spending any time doing it, and you're spending all the time doing it. So it's interesting as a kind of an alignment tool to have a discussion around, hey, why don't you pick that up? Another thing, talking about these, what I call value targets, all these different stakeholders that you affect, you can kind of try to encourage how much you serve these people, in what way, what's the linkage between these different stakeholders of varying degrees, what's the proportion of your energy and the value that you serve, and also what level of empathy, understanding, curiosity even, you have for each of these different areas, and where do you think you should shift it? It's also interesting to kind of figure out how you behave situationally in different contexts, and who you might be really, and who you hope to be, and somehow relate it to how others perceive you in certain situations through feedback, what they may then think you really are, and how they might need you to be, and have a discussion around it. So useful, interesting to take different perspectives on things and see where there's deltas and what's going on there. So how comfortable are you with how you interact with others? The hardest one is the true identity, your values, your purpose, your authentic self. Who are you really? What do you really want outside of the others around you, what they need from you? I love this quote to death. This just talks to burnout. You often feel tired not because you've done too much, but because you've done too little of what sparks a light in you. Do you know what sparks light in you? If you don't, how are you going to get to know? If you know and you're not doing it, what can you do about it? Through exercises like a career timeline, understanding your highs and lows for your career, you can get a little bit of the clue. You can summarize what brings you joy, what brings you down, and then probe it. You can look at something like a classic coaching tool, the Wheel of Life, thinking about your work life and your personal life, and think about the different areas that matter to you and how happy you are with each of these. What's going on there? Are you spending too much time at work? Are you not doing your hobbies? You can dig into like the human qualities, how you might show up and how you might be different. Are you a fighter? Are you serious? Are you caring? How can you prioritize these? It's like a kind of a brand identity trick. But it's helpful to kind of maybe pull out who you really are. And ultimately, you can do exercise and visioning exercises, and these can be, we were chatting in the green room about this, it can be dangerous if you're not set up in the right way. I use a leaving card exercise, which is a bit problematic in workshops with teams. But I remember my coach said, you know, imagine you're at your 80th birthday party and all the people that mattered in your life are there. What do you hope they would say about the impact you had on them and how you were? That's heavy. But it's useful. It can help direct you and work out what your purpose is. You know, maybe define some of your principles and qualities of how you want to be and where you want to invest your time. So how comfortable are you with who you really are? Do you know? And how has it changed? So with all these different layers, it's really interesting because if you take kind of a pace or sharing layers model, the stuff on the outside changes more frequently. It's more tangible, it's less unique. The stuff on the inside is harder to understand, less comfortable, more lonely. But you need the stuff on the inside to express yourself, to kind of create the change and the movements in the world around you. And you need to do reflection and self-discovery to get further in. Which layers of self are you most connected to and actively investing in? So we're all different, and models help to frame our perspectives. I've shown you a whole bunch of tools that I consider like a kaleidoscope of different lenses to look at yourselves through. I run shaping workshops to help engage designers and teams to gather data to develop more robust industry models, developing stronger bespoke competency frameworks for organizations around the world in different places. This is in Japan. Doing nice kind of engaging activities that help probe difficult topics in more fun and engaging ways. And online, you can do it and cluster it in different ways. I wrote a series of Medium articles in 2018, like one a day. It was crazy. And they're all public, all free, and they've inspired thousands of people to develop their own toolkits for their organizations, like at ANZ with Michelle Walter. All these differences across people. And I'm trying to get a book done. Really, I am trying. But it's hard. I'm working with Eva Lotta Lam to bring it to life, creating this playbook for self. Various tools and templates that might help people do this without me having to be there. A kind of a toolkit based on 6 modes of self-strategy. And this is a bunch of the tools. And some context that may be familiar to you that might guide you to particular sequences that can help pick the tools yourself. And then some ways in which you can adapt the tools for what you need. So I'm hoping with your motivation and support that I can get some beta copies out this year. So I'm really sorry I've been going over, and I really hope not to. I blame the coffee, kinetic. These tools, I believe, help strengthen 4 powers. The power of perspective, to help you understand where you've come from, to help you explore the possibilities ahead of you, what might come next. Could you go into product? Could you stay what you're doing? Could you go and open a bakery? Which might help you define your pursuits. And while you're doing that, you might develop an emerging purpose that helps define you. And it's iterative. The perspective informs the possibilities, that clarifies the pursuits, that fuels the perspective again, whilst informing a purpose that helps to guide that too. So maybe we need to go beyond the boxes, ladders, and paths. Maybe think about our own unique shapes, many lenses, and changing layers of self. Thinking about the perspective, possibilities, and pursuits. And remember, there's no quick fixes for this stuff. The tools, the workshops, mentoring, and coaching can all help to a degree. But transformation at a meaningful level can be helped by tools, but it can take time and is better with a team. This is some of the people that have helped me along this journey that I'm still on, 6 or 7 years of identity crisis, or chrysalis. And I want to just kind of leave you with this with the last reflection. It's a quote from Maya Angelou's on the Pulse of Morning, a poem she read at the first inauguration of President Bill Clinton. Each new hour holds new chances, a new beginning. The horizons lean forward, offering you space to place new steps of change. Remember, identities are fluid. It's what makes us human. How can we make hope possible rather than despair inevitable? There is hope, and I believe the hope is you. My last reflection, what will be your new steps of change? Which layers of self will you invest in and how? Get back to your sheets. Maybe mark it up. Do it now, maybe later. Where are you going to invest and how? If you'd indulge me for some questions for later, go to the Mentimeter and maybe just kind of put some questions, comments, reflections of what's come up for you through this. And I'll share some analysis of this later as well, which I think would be interesting for us as an industry. So just do that for a few minutes and I'll just close up in a second. Is it on the wrong one? Aha! Sorry. Oh, God. There we go. Sorry. Ah. Okay. You do that, and then I'll just say thank you. Didn't quite work.